Hello and welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and... I got you there on Revolution Radio, broadcasting from Australia, where it's more than just radio. So jump in the chat room if you can. We just did, and we could, so you can too. This is show number 401, 1 and 400, and we're talking about the hypothesis, the epiphany, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. If you missed Solaris' show with Jeff Woolwine, shame on you. But she was talking tonight about UFOs and petroglyphs in the sky. Petroglyphs in the sky. Now, it only costs $5 a month. Thereabouts to access the Freedom Slips archives. So if you go there, register, you can check out all of our shows, anyone's shows that is broadcasting via this medium. That's pretty cool, I think, and it's a price of a coffee. You get a little biscuit too if you're lucky. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I am, in the beautiful suburb of Pemulwuy. That's the Rug people, and we like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Radio. So look, if you missed Solaris' show, shame on you. If you can catch her on the archives. That's good. She does have the slot just before us, and it's always an amazing lineup of guests that she brings along. And the talks they're having are brilliant. It's just fun. It's good fun and full of information. That's what it is, right? And hopefully this is what this experience is for you as well, the next couple hours that you're going to spend with us. And thank you very much for electing to do so. This is listener-funded radio. What does it mean? It means that we don't get sponsored by any of the large corporations. So I'm not going to say any of the names. Haha. So we're not getting any money from anyone. The only money that's coming to the station is either through... product purchases, through clicking of sponsor sites, and of course the biggest chunk comes from donations. That's all of you out there. If you like what the station does, please keep the donations going. That's all I have to say on that. This is as I said, this is our 401st show, which means we are galloping, Dave. We are galloping towards year 9. In another couple of months, another couple of months, we'll be hitting our 9th year on air, bringing you hopefully some interesting content. Every Jubilee show, which is the 100 Jubilee, 100, 200, 300, or 400, we put together a synopsis of our previous shows, and it has now. Not morphed, but it has transformed or evolved into grown. There you go. It's okay. It is okay. It is, and then you can actually see the. If you look at the old shows, you can see the evolution of the text. No, it's our take on. Well, what does it all mean? What does it all really mean? I mean, what is the game here, right? And do we claim infallibility? Far from it. Do we claim to know it all? Not really. What we do claim, though, is to shine light into the darkest corners. And we do lay claim to our ability to talk about things that others can't talk about, for the very simple reason that this isn't our job. We can't get fired. No, if we do get fired, then it's not going to destroy us. So we will talk about things that did maybe off the books for others, or they're just too crazy. I mean, there's a reason this is called Shiny Side Out in reference to a tinfoil head. The greatest thinkers, the greatest movers and shakers, the greatest catalysts in human history were always prosecuted and, derided as insane or crazy, right? Certainly iconoclasts and the beautiful what's it? Eccentrics, eccentrics, and we are all of those. We're all of that, surely. But you can't push the envelope if you stay in the envelope. In fact, this is the show cycle where you will find out that there really is no spoon. latest news on telomere and telomerase, I should say, research. Now we've spent some time on those, but this is the latest I could find that covers all the things that we want to cover for you. The latest article, and that's by Y. Chan, Podlewski, and Logeswara, and also L. Chan. So it's a journal reference here, and this was published by the Arizona State University. There's a link included in the show notes, and this article was taken from the Science Daily, February 27, 2018. Can we stay young forever, or even recapture lost youth? And research from, sorry? Hopefully, I know, right? No, I mean, that's the thing, though. We're at the age of the possible, I think. We're entering the age of the possible. Research from the lab of Professor Julian Chan in the School of Molecular Sciences at Arizona State University recently uncovered a crucial step in the telomerase, I think I should say telomerase, enzyme catalytic cycle. This catalytic cycle determines the ability of the human telomerase enzyme to synthesize DNA repeats, specifically DNA segments of 6 nucleotides, onto chromosome ends, and so afford immortality in cells. It actually uses the RNA as templates. Ooh, I know that. Understanding the underlying mechanism of telomerase action offers new avenues toward effective anti-aging therapeutics. Typical human cells are mortal and cannot forever renew themselves, right? I think we've spent a lot of time talking about that. And it was demonstrated first by Leonard Hayflick a half a century ago. Human cells have a limited replicative lifespan, with older cells reaching this limit sooner than younger cells. This Hayflick limit, which we've mentioned before, of cellular lifespan is directly related to the number of unique DNA repeats found at the ends of the genetic material bearing chromosomes. These DNA repeats are part of the protective capping structures termed telomeres, which safeguard the ends of chromosomes from unwanted and unwarranted DNA rearrangements that destabilize the genome, like the little knobs at the end of your shoelaces that Dave mentioned. Each time the cell divides, the telomeric DNA shrinks and will eventually fail to secure the chromosome ends. This continuous reduction of telomere length functions as a molecular clock that counts down to the end of cell growth. Sounds like a kill switch to you? The diminished ability for cells to grow is strongly associated with the aging process, with a reduced cell population directly contributing to weakness, illness, and organ failure. Dave?
The fountain of youth at molecular level. Counteracting the telomere shrinking process is the enzyme telomerase. That uniquely holds the key to delaying or even reversing the cellular aging process. Telomerase offers cellular aging and lengthening by lengthening the telomeres, adding back lost DNA repeats to add time onto the molecular clock countdown, effectively extending the lifespan of the cell. Telomerase lengthens telomeres by repeatedly synthesizing very short DNA repeats of nucleotides. The building blocks of DNA, with the sequence GG, TT, AG onto the chromosome ends from an RNA template located within the enzyme itself. However, the activity of the telomerase enzyme is insufficient to completely restore the lost telomeric DNA repeats, nor to stop cellular aging. The gradual shrinking of telomeres negatively affects the replicative capacity of human adult stem cells, the cells that restore damaged tissues and or replenish aging organs in our bodies. The activity of telomerase in adult stem cells merely slows down the countdown of the molecular clock and does not completely immortalize these cells. Therefore, adult stem cells become exhausted in aged individuals due to telomere length shortening that results in increased healing times and organ tissue degradation from inadequate cell populations. Meki. Still Becky muted?
Sorry, tapping the full potential of telomerase. Understanding the regulation and limitation of the telomerase enzyme holds the promise of reversing telomere shortening and cellular aging with the potential to extend human lifespan and improve the health and wellness of elderly individuals. That's really the key here, right? I mean, you don't want to just live longer, you want to live it well. Research from the laboratory, of Chan and his colleagues, Yinan Chan, Joshua Podlewski, and Denuguen Logeswaran, recently uncovered a crucial step in the telomerase catalytic cycle that limits the ability of telomerase to synthesize telomeric DNA repeats onto chromosome ends. Telomerase has a built-in braking system to ensure precise synthesis of correct telomeric DNA repeats. This safeguarding brake, however, also limits the overall activity of the telomerase enzyme, said Professor Chen. Finding a way to properly release the brakes on the telomerase enzyme has the potential to restore the lost telomere length of adult stem cells and to even reverse cellular aging itself. Reverse cellular aging. It's not a cream that you put on. We're making your cells, this is like the ultimate internal treatment, right? If you think about it. This intrinsic brake of telomerase refers to a pause signal encoded within the RNA template of telomerase itself for the enzyme to stop DNA synthesis at the end of the sequence GGTTAG. When telomerase restarts DNA synthesis for the next DNA repeat, this pause signal is still active and limits DNA synthesis. Moreover, the revelation of the braking system finally solves the decades-old mystery of why a single specific nucleotide stimulates telomerase activity. By specifically targeting the pause signal that prevents restarting DNA repeat synthesis, telomerase enzymatic function can be supercharged to better stave off telomere length reduction, with the potential to rejuvenate aging human adult stem cells. Human diseases then include dyskeratosis congenita, aplastic anemia, and idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis have been genetically linked to mutations that negatively affect telomerase activity and or accelerate the loss of telomere length, I should say. This accelerated telomere shortening closely resembles premature aging with increased organ deterioration and a shortened patient lifespan from critically insufficient cell populations. Increasing telomerase activity is the seemingly most promising means of treating these diseases. Dave?
While increased telomerase activity could bring youth to aging cells and cure premature aging-like diseases, too much of a good thing can be damaging for the individual. Just as youthful stem cells use telomerase to offset telomere length loss, cancer cells employ telomerase to maintain their aberrant and destructive growth. Augmenting and regulating telomerase functions will have to be performed with precision. Walking a narrow line between cell rejuvenation and heightened risk for cancer development. Distinct from human stem cells, somatic cells constitute the vast majority of the cells in the human body and lack telomerase activity. The telomerase deficiency of human somatic cells reduces the risk of cancer development as telomerase fuels uncontrolled cancer growth. Therefore, drugs that increase telomerase activity indiscriminately in all cell types are not desired. Toward the goal of precisely augmenting telomerase activity selectively within adult stem cells, this discovery reveals the crucial step in telomerase catalytic cycle as an important new drug target. Small molecular drugs can be screened or designed to increase telomerase activity exclusively within stem cells for disease treatment as well as anti-aging therapies without increasing the risk of cancer.
And there's some interesting stuff here. So it's all new stuff, or some of it is new, some of it is new research. I'm going to do some more research into the increased telomerase activity and how it fuels cancer growth, because the explanation for that isn't here, but I want to understand how that actually works, or if it's just a throwaway sentence. So just bear with me on that one, because that's fascinating stuff. But it is just brilliant if you think about it. I mean, this is taken very seriously now from fringe science. It has gone all the way to potentially being a commonly available treatment, if you will, right? I mean, telomere treatment might be a thing of the future. What you need? Oh, give me another 30 years, doc. Right? Maybe go to the hairdresser. Yeah, I'll have a haircut and 20 years of my life, thanks. It's short back and sides.
Tab.
Tab. Right. Can I just brain you? Brainwave. Cash, what's cash? Daddy, what's Israel? Yeah, no, it's crazy. What? Who said that? Now we've looked at individual potential immortality. So the key reason this is part of the show notes here is to show that immortality is a definite possibility even for us. And then, as you know, that Dave and I believe we have been interfered with. We are now the second race to have been created on this planet that we know of, at least, certainly in the records that we have. So it is critical to understand that even in our limited state, we could still attain healthy immortality if we can, crack that little nut. Imagine how much more you could be and do if, in fact, you were not limited and you had not been interfered with, and you were, in fact, I'm going to put this out here, one of the Anunnaki. Now, I'm using the Anunnaki here as a very loose term of those that did interfere with us. We're going to talk about, I think it's the Epic of Atrahasis a bit further down, much further down. No, here it is. Definitely next week. Atrahasis Epic, and we will talk about this because it's important. And we shared this with you before when we talked about the Igigi, but it's critical to understand where we are. So personal immortality is a possibility. Individuals living for a very, very long time is a possibility. Well, what about the age of humanity at large? So scientifically accepted is that we've been around for about 300,000 years, and as Homo sapiens, right? Roughly 300,000 years ago. Fossils attributed to Homo sapiens along with stone tools are dated to approximately 300,000 years ago, and they were found at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, and they yield the earliest fossil evidence for anatomically modern Homo sapiens. Modern human presence in East Africa at Garamota was at about 276,000 years ago. A 170,000-year-old jawbone fossil discovered in Israel in 2017 is the oldest human remain found outside of Africa. However, in July of 2019, anthropologists reported the discovery of a 210,000-year-old remains of Homo sapiens and 170,000-year-old remains of Homo neanderthalensis in Apidima cave in Peloponnesian Greece, more than 150,000 years older than the previous Homo sapiens finds in Europe. 150,000 years. We've just pushed Homo sapiens 150,000 years into the past as having a presence outside of Africa. Now, this is all mainstream science here. Neanderthals emerged from the Homo heidelbergensis lineage at about the same time, about 300,000 years ago. Patrilineal and matrilineal, most recent common ancestors of living humans, roughly between 200,000 and 100,000 years ago, with some estimates of the patrilineal MRCA, or most recent common ancestry, somewhat higher, ranging up to 250 to 500,000 years ago, which is interesting because that goes right out of the 300,000, right, if you're with me. Homo sapiens in Ethiopia, a wash river near present-day Herto village, practiced mortuary rituals. So behavioral Homo sapiens. Dave?
So 130 to 80,000 marine isotope stage 5, and it's Eemian. Modern human presence in southern Africa and West Africa. Appearance of mitochondrial haplogroup, and these are groups of people that share the same origin. It was called the MT haplogroup L2. Now, I've been talking to some people talking about the origin of people living in and speaking Magyar, Mickey, and matching one of the haplogroups in Europe from the Paracas skulls, for instance. That's an extraordinary linking to those groups. So, Mickey, what's the next one?
No, that's yours again.
Okay, so that's then coming to more recent times, 80,000 to 50,000 years ago, MIS4, and then the beginning of the upper Paleolithic. The early evidence for behavioral modernity, which is the modern times, appearance of MT haplogroups M and N, the southern dispersal migration out of Africa, the proto-Australoid people of Oceania. There also the archaic admixture from Neanderthals in Eurasia, from Denisovans in Oceania, with trace amounts of Eastern Eurasia, and from an unspecified African lineage of archaic humans in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as an interbred species of Neanderthals and Denisovans in Asia and Oceania. Meki, there's also that when they say unspecified African lineage, there is also the people that used to live in the Sahara region before it was a desert, because it was the thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think what we will find now. This is the latest I could find in the research. When we had the text last time, Dave. In fact, show number 300. The age of humans that was accepted was 200,000 years. So it was 200,000 years. Now it is accepted to be.
200, now it's 300.
Yeah. Now it's 300,000 years. So my suspicion is that we will see this being pushed further into the past. Especially as we're getting better at microbiology and DNA, I guess forensics, if you want to call it that. But if you look at just the vast grouping or the vast amounts of people that are coming together, different people, Denisovans, Neanderthals, unspecifieds, right? Southern dispersal migration. No, exactly, right? And that will come later. But it's astounding that, so the human race, and these are all humans, please be aware of that, was much more diverse than what we have today. So we might look out in the street in any metropolis in the world and see dark-skinned people, light-skinned people, different shaped eyes, different shaped bodies, different shaped or different colored hair and whatnot, and we think, we're a diverse species. No, we're not at all. Like, sure, we've got some of the genetic markers of some of the races that we somehow have incorporated in ourselves, but compared to what it would have been like maybe 100 or 150,000 years ago, we're not at all. We're very homogeneous and very boring in many ways. But back then,
I
please.
Liken it to dogs. So dogs are species, and all modern humans are not. We are all exactly the same, with just some differences in appearance only. Whereas the dogs you see are, from whether they're large to small, east to west, north to south, they are different species. And they're the kinds of species that we're talking about here with the Neanderthals, the Denisovans of, Florensis. But today, we're not. We are one species.
Correct.
I tried to describe the differences.
100%.
But that's a stupid way
of
describing
it. Yeah. It is, because you're right. No, but that makes perfect sense, and it's really important to understand that, right? Because it just goes to show just how diverse we were, and I believe still are. in many ways. Which brings us to 50 to 25,000 years ago. And this is when science believes that behavioral modernity develops according to the Great Leap Forward theory. Again, it's a theory, right? It also coincided, it seems, with the extinction of Homo florensis, the M168 mutation, which is carried by all non-African males, appearance of MT haplogroups U and K, the peopling of Europe, the peopling of the North Asian mammoth steppe, and Paleolithic art. You know, those cave paintings in France especially. Extinction of Neanderthals and other archaic human variants, with possible survival of hybrid populations in Asia and Africa, as well as the appearance of Y haplogroup R2, MT haplogroups J and X. And then finally, after between now and 25,000 years ago, so the most recent history, if you will, the Minato-gawa man, proto-mongoloid, about 20 to 14,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum, the Epipaleolithic Mesolithic Holocene, peopling of the Americas, appearance of Y haplogroup R1A, MT haplogroups V and T, and various recent divergence associated with the environmental pressures they would have felt. For example, light skin in Europeans and East Asians after 30,000 years, and Inuit adaptation to high-fat diet and cold climate about 20,000 years ago. That's what they say here. Now, it is interesting here, Dave, before I go on with the text, that they still have at 25,000 years the peopling of the Americas. I say, right? So this is the latest. This is the latest I could find, which is odd, because we will talk about the case of Elizabeth McIntyre Stein. Maybe I don't know. Today, maybe not. Maybe next time. I want to. No, we should. Oh, yeah, I think might just make it, my friend, because it's really interesting because she found something very different. But we'll get to it when we get to it. And then finally, the extinction of late surviving archaic humans at the beginning of the Holocene, about 12,000 years ago. That's an interesting date, right? Accelerated divergence due to selection pressures in populations participating in the Neolithic revolution after 12,000 years ago. East Asian types of ADH1B associated with rice domestication of lactase persistence. So this is where science today believes humans have come from. Well, this is roughly the timeline for us. But 300,000 years, we mixed with other populations. That was something that was very much never discussed when I grew up and did biology and they told me in school. Then there was Neanderthal, and then there was a clear break, and then Homo sapiens started, right? Denisovans weren't mentioned. Florensis didn't exist at the time, right? And none of the other unidentified races either. So it was a very clear break. Now we know that this is not at all the case. There was a lot of interbreeding, a lot of what they're calling them. Late surviving archaic humans, and there's another one here. These archaic humans, interbred species. It's very interesting that they now make hybrid populations. There you go. Possible survival of hybrid populations in Asia and Africa. So they're making mention of hybrid populations, archaic humans having interbred with, I guess, what we would call modern humans. We only call them ourselves modern humans because we're still here. Right, but we haven't really changed terribly much over the last. If you call it 300,000 years, we haven't changed at all. In fact, now, but let's take this a step further, Dave. Let's just assume 100,000 years. Forget 300,000 years. Assume 100,000 years, right? In 100,000 years, right? There's enough time for 5 civilizations like ours to spring up, right? It makes sense. I mean, if you look back, I mean, we can't really trace ourselves from a civilization point of view further than really 10,000 years.
When was
right?
the last
I mean, Göbekli Tepe.
digging up mud? Oh, that's a great piece of filth over there. Right. So when was it? When the Dark Ages, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but you push it back. And all of a sudden you're standing there going, oh, well, that's fair enough. Because the truth is we have no idea what happened 20,000 years ago. We don't know.
No idea.
No idea.
At the end of the Younger Dryas.
And we find bits and pieces.
About 12,000.
There's that. Yeah, but there's nothing really that we know in depth or in detail. I mean, we make finds, we try to piece things together, and that's great. It's tough work, it's important work, but we should not become dogmatic. We should not use that work then to build theories that could be proven wrong, and we can't let that happen. So we should allow for theories to be proven wrong. We should allow for knowledge to march on, right? And there's this the what was it called? The Great Leap Forward theory, because we don't know what I mean. For 300,000 years, pretty much, we've been walking around the same way, and then all of a sudden we say about 50,000 years ago, oh, there was a great leap forward, and all of a sudden we're behaving like we're behaving today, right? Now, okay, fair enough. And people have said, the consumption of drugs, or the solar radiation or flares, or a whole bunch of things were put forward as explanation for that. Now, cooking of food, yeah, all of that. Now, I believe, but the taming of fire goes further back than 50,000 years, much further, right? The taming of fire is like.
I get you.
Yeah, and fire is like. Fire is, we're talking 150,000 years ago, right? Anyway, however, and this is really the point here, humanity is likely a lot older. And I know this is where we'll lose a few listeners, I get it, right? However, the great antiquity of humanity does not fly in the face of known science. We know there was a bottleneck event for the human population. This means there was a massive reduction of breeding pairs at that time. A massive reduction of breeding pairs at that time. We know this happened. Dave?
Yeah, completely. Genetic bottlenecks in humans. The Toba super eruption, the youngest Toba Tuff, or simply the YTT2, was a super volcanic eruption that occurred sometime between 69,000 and 77,000 years ago at the site of the present-day Lake Toba in Sumatra, Indonesia. It is recognized as one of the Earth's largest known eruptions. The related catastrophe hypothesis holds that this event caused a global volcanic winter of 6 to 10 years and possibly a 1,000-year-long cooling episode. The Toba catastrophe theory suggests that the bottleneck of human population occurred at 70,000 years ago, reducing the total human population to around about 15,000 individuals when Toba erupted and triggered a major environmental change, including a volcanic winter. The theory is based on the geological evidence for sudden climate change that at that time, and for coalescence of some genes, including mitochondrial DNA, the Y chromosome, and some nuclear genes, as well as the relatively low level of genetic variation amongst present-day humans. For example, according to one hypothesis, human mitochondrial DNA, which is maternally inherited, and Y chromosome DNA, paternally inherited from your father, coalesced at around 140 to 60,000 years ago, respectively. Meki.
This suggests that the female line ancestry of all present-day human traces back to a single female, mitochondrial leaf, she's named, at around 140,000 years ago. Single female about 140,000 years ago. And the male line to a single male, which is Y chromosomal Adam, to about 60 to 90,000 years ago. And no, I'm sorry to say to all creationists out there, this is not proof for Adam and Eve. They're separated by about 50,000 years at least in existence, right? But we do know those at these points, these bottlenecks occurred, and our genes became extremely compressed, limited. There was just not very many people left. However, such coalescence is genetically expected and does not necessarily indicate a population bottleneck, because mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome DNA are only a small part of the human genome, and are atypical in that they are inherited exclusively through the mother or through the father, respectively. Most genes are inherited randomly from either the father or the mother, thus cannot be traced to either matrilineal or patrilineal ancestry. Other genes display coalescence points from 2 million to 60,000 years ago, thus casting doubt on the existence of recent and strong bottlenecks. Other possible explanations for limited genetic variation among today's humans include a transplanting model or long bottleneck rather than a catastrophic environmental change, meaning the breeding populations just were sort of self-regulating and didn't get out much. Inbreeding is what we like to call it. This would be consistent with suggestions that in sub-Saharan Africa, human populations dropped to as low as 2,000 individuals for perhaps as long as 100,000 years before numbers began to increase again in the late Stone Age. Again, this is where we are from a scientific point of view, Dave.
Bottlenecks in other mammals. Some evidence points to genetic bottlenecks in other mammals in the wake of the Toba eruption. The populations of Eastern African chimpanzee, Bornean orangutans, Central Indian macaque, the cheetah, the tiger, and separation of the nuclear gene pools of eastern and western lowland gorillas all recovered from very low numbers around 70,000 years ago. This does not mean that humanity started at that point in time, though it might, but rather that human variety was severely curtailed. Maybe that there were many more species, maybe blue-skinned, maybe green, maybe some were one-eyed, maybe some that were very large while others might have been very small. Meki, that phrase right there, blue-skinned.
Yep, I put that there.
That's nice. All of that, and because remember we also had the one-eyed, so we had the what are they called? Yeah.
Yes.
That's extraordinary, Meki. So now we have an ample proof that the human family was much more diverse, even as little as 10,000 years ago. Meki.
A mysterious small human species coexisted with modern man in China until at least 10,500 years ago. Scientists have announced based on an analysis of an anomalous thigh bone found in a cave. The discovery brings the number of human species coexisting until very recently to 3. Us, this new one, and the so-called hobbit, Homo florensis, that survived on the Indonesian island of Flores until at least 13,000 years ago. So again, like the number we mentioned earlier, this clearly the scientific text wasn't updated because they said that Homo florensis went extinct 25,000 years ago. Anyway, to put this in perspective, around when saber-toothed tigers and mammoths were going extinct in the late Ice Age and agriculture was beginning to develop in the Levant, which is the Middle East, at least 3 types of humans were roaming the planet. The thigh bone found in Red Deer Cave in Yunnan province is about 14,000 years old and is substantially different from that of a modern man. Professor Darren Curnow of the University of New South Wales and Professor Yi Jieping of the Yunnan Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology report in PLOS ONE. Other remains from the same mysterious species found nearby date to about 10,500 years ago. The thigh bone is more similar to those possessed by Homo habilis and early Homo erectus, which predated man by some 1.5 million years, than to man himself. How about that? Interestingly, though, Dave, the book Forbidden Archaeology by Cremo et al., as well as The Evolution, highlight the possibility that humanity might be a great deal older. But both works are usually derided by mainstream science, even though their scholarly qualities are not questions. I've got both books. And nobody has ever questioned Cremo's scientific approach and method. Yes, what they question is what he found and his interpretation. Nonsense, right? They cite a great many anomalies in the fossil record and show documented evidence of artifacts and tools and Homo sapiens bones appearing in geological strata they should not. However, when the dating is not in line with what the establishment wants, the offending scientist either self-censors or is barred from the scientific community. That's impossible, Mackie. That would never happen. Science is there too. It's impossible. I myself some English. And it's how would you say that science is there to further our knowledge, Mackie? And that's crazy talk now. We would never do that. Really, Dave. Well, why don't you illuminate for us what happened?
Data rejection, inconvenient dating in Mexico. There is the high-profile case of Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre, a geologist working for the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, who was dispatched to an archaeological site in Mexico to date a group of artifacts in the 1970s. This travesty also illustrates how far established scientists will go to guard orthodox tenets. McIntyre used state-of-the-art equipment and backed up her results by using 4 different methods, but her results were off the chart. The lead archaeologist expected a date of 25,000 years or less, and the geologist finding was 250,000 years or more. These controversial findings are orders of magnitude older than the scientific consensus for habitation of the New World, which generally traces widespread humans migration to the New World to 13,000 to 16,000 years ago from today. The findings at, I can't pronounce that,
Huyatlaco.
have mostly been repudiated by larger scientific community and have seen only occasional discussion in literature. Meki.
The figure of 25,000 years or less was critical to the Bering Strait crossing theory, and it was the motivation behind the head archaeologists tossing Steen McIntyre's results in the circular file and asking for a new series of dating tests. This sort of reaction does not occur when dates match the expected chronological model that supports accepted theory, and we like to call that confirmation bias. Steen McIntyre was given a chance to retract her conclusions, but she refused. She found it hard thereafter to get her papers published, and she lost a teaching job at an American university. Now, I did some more digging.
Good.
And this is what happened. To be clear, these are the findings. Biostratigraphic researcher Sam Van Landingham has published 2 peer-reviewed analyses that confirm the earlier findings of about 250,000 years before the present for the tool-bearing strata at Huyatlaco. Let me say this again. Sam Van Landingham has published 2 peer-reviewed analyses that confirm the earlier findings, these are Steen's findings, Steen McIntyre, of about 250,000 years before present for the tool-bearing strata at Huyatlaco. His 2004 analysis found that the Huyatlaco samples could be dated to the Sangamonian interglacial period, which is about 80,000 to 220,000 years before the present, by the presence of multiple diatom species, one of which first appeared during this era and others that went extinct by the era's end. Van Landingham's 2006 paper refined and reconfirmed his 2004 findings. Have our textbooks been updated? Has Steen McIntyre been vindicated? I think not. So I want to be very clear here, right? So the first part of the text I took from Graham Hancock, great page, thank you. And the other one came from a scientific publication, right? So Sam Van Landingham, independent of anything that Graham Hancock has published. So we have a scientist here who found something that didn't fit the mold. She was then barred from a career, promising career by all accounts that I heard. And this was in the 1970s. That was in the 1970s, yeah? And then in 2004, Sam Van Landingham, and in 2006 again, he undertook 2 analyses and published them. They were peer-reviewed. And this is now with 30 odd years of more science, I guess, better tests and all kinds of things, right? He confirms that she was correct. And even more so, he bases his findings on the presence of multiple diatom species. I urge you to do your own research on what that means. But this is a great marker to actually find out how old something is.
They're
go ahead.
Very small, single-celled exoskeleton sea creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Which come in a range of different configurations. They're wonderful little things. And by finding those, you can identify the year range that they existed in, and if your item is laying in amongst that, and the strata has not been disturbed by flooding or anything else which the other people had previously sought as the excuse to be able to dismiss her work, then since you can't dismiss it, it lays it in there, it's solid, it's locked in, and that's the date. That's
Yep.
it.
That's
And
it.
it's relative dating, because you're dating the things that it's found amongst, but it's very accurate indeed. Now, I just want to say that McIntyre had also created the method, so precise method of dating and doing archaeological digs, that it's still used today. She created it.
Mm-hmm.
No one could fault her on her practice, on her method, but they sought to say, you know what, your findings don't match our narrative, therefore, it's got to be tossed into the bin. That's the round filer, if you don't know what that is. Meki,
That's right.
it's not uncommon. I mean, I'm currently
No.
looking into the reasons for the end of the Younger Dryas period being a meteor impact, maybe several meteors, and that 12,500 years ago or have you was the date roughly placed on this. And when you start to see 12,000 roughly, approximately 12,000 years ago, an event, a global event, at the end of the megafauna, the end of the ice age, the sudden flooding, massive loss of life across the planet. This is now only starting to gather momentum. But that was preposterous 10 years ago. Like, no one wanted to buy stock in this idea. And now they're...
it's not going anywhere. Sell!
Buy, sell. That is now a thing. And it's become so widely accepted now. They're looking now everywhere trying to find further evidence, not to support it, but to bolster it. It's already itself, and they're going, it's time for Stacks On. Stacks On the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all become a part of this thing. Now, wouldn't you love for her to be vindicated, Becky? Finally, officially.
Look, officially, of course I would, but it would cause huge problems. Let's quickly go back to the timeline we just explained to everybody here. 300,000 years ago is when humans first appeared, right? But they're saying here now that the oldest fossils that were found in July 2019, so that's an update, right? They're 210,000 years old. So this is another 40,000 years on top of that in America. Forget Europe here for a second. So Europe, it doesn't take a leap to make it from Africa to Europe, right? You can even, hop across the Suez, canal, or the Strait of Suez. There wasn't a canal before. You can board it, you can walk it, but you can get there fairly easily. The only sensible way this is really the Bering Strait crossing theory, right? The only sensible way for people to come into America, as far as the scientists were concerned at the time, was to cross the Bering Strait. The Bering Strait could only be crossed about 25,000 years ago. That's when they think that, bingo, the water was low enough and we can walk across. Beautiful. Except, no, clearly someone was doing something with tools 210,000 years ago. Right? This is 10 times the time, right? 10 times the population. And as we do more, I know, but as we do more archaeology, in especially the Americas, especially South America, we'll find many more interesting things. And we have to push the date further. And this is my prediction. No other prediction. This is the one. We will push the age of humanity back further and further and further until we're going to be so far in the past that we have no idea if we're up or down, because that is what we're looking at here. This is what's coming our way. Okay, And you can deny it, you can go with it. It doesn't matter. It's, I think, very, very, very much it has a fact. Yeah. Now, do we still have time for the Smithsonian problem?
Oh, like less than 12 minutes, maybe 9 minutes.
I think we can, but then we can't get the critique in. That's tough. Oh, let's try it anyway.
Yeah, sure.
I'll get it started, then you get this. All right. Now, in 1987, paleontologist Jerry McDonald, and this was published in the Smithsonian Journal, July 1992, volume 23, issue 4, pages 70 to 79. Jerry McDonald discovered a wide variety of fossilized tracks from several different species of animals and birds located in the Permian strata. Among the various fossilized tracks were the clear prints of a human foot, so they say. However, the Permian strata has been dated from 290 to 248 million years ago, millions of years before animals, birds, dinosaurs, and yes, man was supposed to exist. How can these prints be explained? In July 1992, the Smithsonian Magazine had an article on these tracks called Petrified Footprints, a puzzling parade of Permian beasts. Somebody loves the alliterations. The magazine acknowledged the mystery, acknowledging what paleontologists have like to call problematic. It described what appeared to be large mammal and bird tracks that evolved long after the Permian period. Yet, these tracks are clearly Permian. While it is commendable that McDonald and the Smithsonian clearly acknowledged the existence of these tracks in a strata that contradicts the current evolutionary theory, it is noteworthy that they highlight only the mammal and bird prints and don't mention the human footprint found with them. Now, before I go any further, current evolutionary theory. It's a theory, right? Prints in stone are a fact. A theory is a thought construct. Interestingly enough, since these tracks have been discovered, evolutionists have not tried to argue their authenticity or debunk them, nor have they tried to argue that the footprint isn't human. Often they claim that it's a print that just looks like a human footprint. But yeah, it's not discussed any further. Dave, what is this standard response to evidence that does not always fit?
Oh, goodness me. So, Carl Bohr and other strict creationists have claimed that in 1912 an electric company employee in Arkansas broke open a large lump of coal, revealing a man-made iron pot. The original coal bed was reportedly mid-Pennsylvanian age, about 300 million years ago by conventional geology. Bohr and others suggest that this finding overturns the standard geological timetable. The following account is presented on Bohr's Creation Evidence website, followed by an advertisement encouraging readers to purchase a cast replica of the pot and nodule, which he describes as a 5.5 inch wide, 6.5 inch long, and 4.7 inches tall. And here's the quote. The following text is a letter, from Frank Kennard, the man who found an iron pot embedded in a large lump of coal. The Creation Evidence Museum has a copy of this letter on file. Sulphur Springs, Arkansas, November 27th, 1948. While I was working in a municipal electric plant in Thomas, Oklahoma in 1912, I came upon a solid chunk of coal which was too large to use. I broke it with a sledgehammer. This iron pot fell from the center, leaving the impression or mold of the pot in a piece of the coal. Jim Stool, an employee of the company, witnessed the breaking of the coal and saw the pot fall out. I traced the source of the coal and found that it had come from Wilburton, Oklahoma mines. Signed, Frank J. Kennard, sworn to be before me in Sulphur Springs, Arkansas, this 27th day of November 1948. Julia L. Eldred, NP. My commission expires May 21st, 1951. The Benton Co. 3 minutes to go. Go.
Now, this is the response that the debunkers have to this particular piece of evidence. Now, first of all, notice that they are making ample use of the word creationist, right? This is the first indication that we cannot trust anything that this evidence reveals to us. One problem with this kind of evidence that it relies heavily on the veracity and memories of the individuals involved. Since people commonly lie, or otherwise fallible in this regard, scientifically anecdotal evidence is not worth much. One might ask, why would these men make up such a story? There might be any number of reasons: for a gag, attention, etc. However, even if they were telling the truth as far as they knew it, there is an aspect of the report about which they could be mistaken, and on which the significance of the find could rest. And that's how we have debunked a potentially earth-shattering discovery, finding a 300. Well, yeah, no, but people commonly lie, Dave. People commonly lie. Don't you know that?
Well,
right?
Humans are
People,
right? That's fine too. And anecdotal evidence.
yeah.
Right. They still use the word evidence in the word anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, I know. It's so, I mean, you scratch your head. I mean,
brush, aren't they?
Yeah. If I had half the money that I needed, I would go out digging up all kinds of things all over the place. That's what I would do, because that's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this. But I wouldn't dig in the places where people are digging today, because every monumental find was by complete accident. Göbekli Tepe, a guy was clearing a tree trunk, a root, or no, actually it was a boulder. He was trying to move a boulder from his field in Turkey because he was plowing it. Okay. And other finds. Oh no, we're just building a house, or we did some digging, or whatever. No, nobody ever went out there looking for stuff. This is a complete coincidence. Okay, and I don't care what people say. Then we find 6 bones in Africa, and we say, "Oh, eureka! I found the beginning of man." Yeah, good for you, I say. Good for you. Let's call her Lucy. That's a nice name. I'm sorry, man. I just find it hard to to give credence to these things. And then, the pyramid swindle as well, where they found some inscriptions inside which were misspelled. They were misspelled. The hieroglyphics and the cartouches inside the pyramids were misspelled. The only writing that was found in or on the pyramid ever, by a guy by himself when he was in there, and he was hanging by a thread, right? And then it's misspelled. Oh, okay. Right, but clearly that is valid evidence, Dave. This is
the equivalent of $1 trillion building the pyramids to have some fruitcake in there doing the wrong inscription or screwing it up, right?
Right.
It's so accurate. The pyramid constructions are so accurate that I can't believe that there'd be a misspelling.
And the thing is, we know that he put it in himself to do it. I forget his name now. I'm sorry. I'll look it up. But
I'm a
it is Petrie. I'm a clown. Yeah. So, and he wanted. He needed a breakthrough. I mean, he wanted to link the pyramids to some name, because if you do that, then you get to be the guy that discovered who built the pyramids, right? That's really the trick here, the confirmation at least. And this is what's driving people. It's this need for recognition. But a coal miner or a farm worker doesn't really have that. People in academia do, because their funding depends on it, and other people, rich lazy layabouts have that as well. Whereas common people in the street, and I'm generalizing, I know, they don't really have that need to shine. There's the music. Don't go anywhere. Joe Bear's coming up with a roundtable. I think Studio B. Go to Studio B, please.
Or Studio A. You test the water yourself. It's whichever one it is. We'll see you next week for show 402. Enjoy your week. Stay safe.